Something was found inside Nancy Guthrie's home that investigators were not expecting. Not a weapon. Not a ransom note. Not a body. Something far quieter than that. And in the world of federal investigations, quiet discoveries are often the most devastating ones. The FBI does not return to a location they have already processed without cause. They do not revisit a crime scene on a whim. When agents go back, it means something has changed. Something they initially dismissed has suddenly become the thread that could unravel everything. And in this case, the details found inside that modest Tucson, Arizona home did exactly that. They changed the entire direction of the investigation. Tonight, we are going to walk you through everything. The bloodstains, the surveillance footage, the mysterious glove, the seized Range Rover, and the DNA evidence that has taken this case to a level that only federal resources can handle. Stay with us, because this story is far from over. Nancy Guthrie is 84 years old, and she is the mother of Savannah Guthrie, the co-anchor of NBC's flagship morning program, The Today Show. She lives in Tucson, Arizona, a city known for its desert warmth and close-knit communities. By every account, Nancy was a woman of routine, faith, and family. She attended virtual church services regularly. She had dinner with her children. She lived carefully and quietly. Nothing about her life suggested she would one day be at the center of one of the most closely watched missing persons investigations the country has seen in years. On the evening of January 31, 2026, Nancy spent time with her family. It was an ordinary Friday night. Dinner, conversation, the comfort of people who love each other. Nothing felt off. No arguments were reported. No tension lingered in the air after the evening ended. According to law enforcement's own timeline, Nancy was dropped off at her home shortly before 10 o'clock that night. She went inside. The door closed behind her. That was the last confirmed sighting of Nancy Guthrie by anyone who knew her. The following morning, Sunday, February 1st, Nancy was expected to appear at a friend's home in Tucson to watch a live-streamed church service, something she did nearly every week without fail. When she did not show up, her friends grew concerned. They reached out to her children. Her children could not reach her. By noon that day, a missing person report had been filed with the Pima County Sheriff's Department, and what began as a worried phone call cascaded rapidly into one of the largest multi-agency search operations Arizona has seen in recent memory. What investigators found when they arrived at her home that afternoon set the tone for everything that followed. There were no signs of forced entry, no broken windows, no overturned furniture. But there was something else, something that immediately elevated this from a missing person inquiry to a suspected abduction. On the front porch of Nancy Guthrie's home, investigators discovered bloodstains, confirmed by forensic analysis to be Nancy's blood. That single detail changed everything. Whatever had happened to Nancy Guthrie in the hours between her being dropped off and the next morning had not been peaceful. The quiet of her home was not the quiet of a woman who had simply walked away. It was something else entirely. The most chilling discovery in this investigation did not come from inside the house. It came from a device that most homeowners install and then forget about, a doorbell camera. In the early morning hours of February 1, 2026, around the same time Nancy Guthrie was disappearing from the world's awareness, that camera was capturing something extraordinary. A figure. Masked. Gloved. Armed. For days after Nancy's disappearance, the existence of this footage was known only to investigators. The public knew almost nothing. Law enforcement issued careful, measured statements. They confirmed she was missing. They said they were treating the situation as a possible abduction. They did not yet reveal the surveillance footage. That silence, as we will explore later in this story, was entirely deliberate. Then, on February 10th, 9 days after Nancy vanished, FBI Director Kash Patel took the extraordinary step of personally releasing 6 black-and-white photographs and 3 video clips on social media. The images showed a figure standing outside Nancy Guthrie's front door. The person was wearing a ski mask, long pants, a jacket, gloves, and a holster, with what appeared to be a firearm. On their back, a 25-liter Ozark Trail Hiker Pack backpack, the kind sold exclusively at Walmart. At one point in the footage, the figure reaches up with a gloved hand and attempts to cover the camera lens. They place what appears to be part of a plant in front of it, a deliberate attempt to obstruct any recording. The tilt of the head, the calculated movements, the premeditated effort to blind the camera. None of it looked random. None of it looked impulsive. The FBI described this individual as a male, approximately 5 feet 9 to 5 feet 10 inches tall, with an average build. They released this description widely and increased the reward for information in the case to $100,000. Later, that reward would grow even larger. Savannah Guthrie's family separately announced a private reward of $1 million for any information leading to Nancy's location or her safe return. But here is the detail about that doorbell footage that made investigators pause and look again. There were images showing the suspect in what appeared to be different stages of attire, with and without the backpack. This led to speculation that the suspect had approached the house more than once, possibly on different occasions. The Pima County Sheriff's Department ultimately pushed back on that interpretation, stating publicly that there was no date or timestamp associated with the images, and that suggesting they were taken on different days was, in their words, purely speculative. But the fact that investigators had to issue that clarification at all told its own quiet story. The footage contained layers, and layers take time to fully understand. 2 miles from Nancy Guthrie's home, searchers made a discovery that looked, on the surface, like a breakthrough. A single glove. And not just any glove, a glove that appeared to match the type worn by the masked figure captured on the doorbell camera footage. Investigators collected it carefully. It was submitted for forensic analysis. A DNA profile of an unknown male was successfully extracted from the glove. That was a significant step forward. A DNA profile means a potential identity. It means answers. It means the possibility of a name attached to the faceless figure on that camera. Except it did not produce a name. Not yet. When the FBI ran that DNA profile through CODIS, the Combined DNA Index System, the National Law Enforcement DNA database containing over 19 million offender profiles, there was no match. The database, which includes more than 430,000 offender profiles from Arizona alone, came back silent. The suspect, as of the time of this recording, has never been arrested for a crime that would have placed their DNA in that system. That tells investigators something important in itself. This is not someone with a conventional criminal history. This may be someone who has never been caught before, or someone who has been extraordinarily careful about never leaving a trace until now. There was also DNA recovered from inside Nancy Guthrie's home itself. Biological evidence that did not belong to Nancy, and did not belong to anyone known to have recently been inside that residence. That evidence was submitted for analysis as well. The results from CODIS. Again, no match. But the FBI was not done. They pivoted to a method that has cracked some of the most notorious cases in recent American criminal history. Investigative genetic genealogy, or IgG, is a forensic process that uses DNA from a crime scene not to search a criminal database, but to search publicly available genealogy databases, the kind of platforms that everyday people use to trace their ancestry. By identifying relatives of the unknown suspect through those databases, investigators can build a family tree and work backward toward a specific individual. It is the same technique that famously identified the Golden State Killer after decades of failure, and the same method that helped unmask Brian Kohberger as the killer of 4 University of Idaho students. The challenge in this case is that Nancy's home yielded what investigators described as a mixed DNA sample, meaning the genetic material belongs to more than one person. That complexity slows the process considerably. But investigators confirmed that IgG was already underway. And when IgG works, it works in a way that no amount of masking or glove wearing can prevent. DNA does not lie. It does not hide behind a ski mask. It simply is. Here is what most people do not know about how federal investigations work. when the FBI finishes processing a location, they do not come back unless something has fundamentally changed. The return to a scene, the decision to reopen a location that was already collected, documented, and photographed, is not a routine step. It is a meaningful one. It says, in the language of investigation, that the first pass missed something. Or more precisely, that something new has made the first pass look different. In the Nancy Guthrie case, agents returned to her home. They came back without fanfare. No press conference. No emergency declaration. No dramatic announcement. They arrived, they worked, and they left. The quiet of their return was, in many ways, more unsettling than a flashing siren would have been. Because seasoned investigators do not return quietly to a scene they think is finished. They return quietly to a scene they believe holds something they are not yet ready to share with the world. What specifically drew them back? Based on reporting from multiple credible news organizations, including NBC News and Fox News, investigators were working to extract additional images from the back end of Guthrie's home security system. Images that had not been immediately accessible when the scene was first processed. The FBI's own statement confirmed that previously inaccessible footage was recovered from what they described as residual data located in back-end systems. That phrase is significant. It means the footage existed in a form that required technical forensic expertise to retrieve. It was not sitting there waiting to be watched. It had to be reconstructed, recovered, pulled from the digital infrastructure of the device itself. Modern home security systems store data in ways that are not always obvious. Footage that appears to have been deleted or overwritten can, in many cases, be partially or fully recovered by forensic technicians. The FBI has entire units dedicated to exactly this kind of digital recovery work. When those units go back to a location, it is because someone on the investigative team has a specific theory about what might still be there, and they are confident enough in that theory to justify the effort. The home, in this way, became something more than a crime scene. It became a witness. One that was still speaking, just in a language that required the right equipment to hear. The Nancy Guthrie case took a turn that placed it squarely in the jurisdiction of federal law enforcement for another reason entirely. Ransom demands. In the days following Nancy's disappearance, multiple ransom notes began to surface. On February 2, Tucson CBS affiliate KOLD-TV reported receiving a letter demanding payment for Nancy's release. The letter, investigators noted, contained specific details about Nancy's home and what she had been wearing on the night she disappeared. Those are not details that a random person would know. Investigators took the letter seriously and shared it with the FBI, though they declined to publicly confirm whether it had been sent by whoever was actually holding Nancy. The following day, TMZ reported receiving an alleged ransom note demanding millions of dollars in Bitcoin, complete with a specific cryptocurrency wallet address and a deadline. Harvey Levin, the founder of TMZ, later claimed to have received a subsequent note stating, in essence, that the sender would not be communicating again. Multiple deadlines mentioned in these communications passed without resolution. Investigators were walking one of the most delicate tightropes in law enforcement, trying to determine which, if any, of these communications were genuine, while simultaneously protecting Nancy's safety, managing the family's emotional state, and pursuing forensic leads. A California man was actually arrested on federal charges during this period after he posed as one of Nancy's abductors and attempted to extort money from her family. That scheme, authorities confirmed, was entirely separate from the authentic ransom demands that investigators were still working to authenticate. Savannah Guthrie and her siblings released a video on February 7 that was widely interpreted as an attempt to communicate directly with whoever had their mother. In the video, Savannah said, "We received your message and we understand. We beg you now to return our mother to us so that we can celebrate with her. This is the only way we will have peace. This is very valuable to us, and we will pay." The language was careful. The message was measured. It was the kind of statement crafted not just for the public, but for a specific audience. Someone watching, someone calculating, someone who needed to believe that the family was listening and willing. The involvement of ransom demands, the use of cryptocurrency, the cross-state nature of the communications. All of it cemented the FBI's central role in the investigation and removed it from being simply a local missing person case. Federal jurisdiction over extortion and kidnapping meant that the resources of the Bureau were now fully committed to Tucson. On February 13, law enforcement executed a significant operation at a residence approximately 2 miles from Nancy Guthrie's home. 2 people were removed from the residence. Roads in the surrounding area were closed to the public for approximately 4 hours. One of those individuals was taken in for questioning. They were released the following day. The operation did not produce an arrest, but it did produce questions, and one specific discovery that a former FBI agent has since described as the single most important lead in the entire case. A gray Range Rover. The vehicle was discovered in the parking lot of a Culver's restaurant near the search zone, approximately 2 miles from Nancy's home. Law enforcement moved in on the vehicle carefully. They photographed it. They documented it. And then, in a moment captured by cameras and observers on the scene, they placed a tarp over the rear of the vehicle before opening it. That detail matters enormously. Law enforcement does not cover a vehicle with a tarp out of routine. They cover it when what is inside is something they do not want the public to see. Whether that was to protect evidence from contamination, to prevent journalists or bystanders from photographing the interior, or because of what, or who, may have been visible inside, is something that has not been officially confirmed. Jennifer Coffin-Daffer, a former FBI agent who has been publicly commenting on the case, told Newsweek that she believes the Range Rover is the most significant lead in the investigation. In her words, the decision to put a tarp on the rear of that vehicle before it was opened suggests investigators saw something inside that concerned them, something they were not yet ready to expose to the cameras surrounding the scene. The vehicle was towed and has not, as of recent reporting, been released by authorities. It remains in law enforcement custody, presumably undergoing full forensic examination for DNA, fingerprints, and any other biological or trace evidence that might link it to Nancy Guthrie or to the masked figure on her doorbell camera. If DNA inside the Range Rover can be matched to DNA recovered from the glove found near the home, or to the unknown DNA recovered from inside Nancy's residence, investigators would have something powerful. A connected chain of physical evidence linking a specific vehicle to a specific suspect. The scale of this investigation is, by any measure, extraordinary. Pima County Sheriff Chris Nanos confirmed that at the height of the search, approximately 400 investigators were actively working on the case, combing through thousands of tips and leads submitted from the public. The FBI's Phoenix field office established a fully active command post in Tucson, with personnel being rotated through on a regular basis to ensure, as one FBI official put it, that the case always had fresh eyes reviewing the evidence. Investigators were simultaneously pursuing multiple threads. They were analyzing cell phone data, attempting to reconstruct the movements of people in and around Nancy's neighborhood on the night of January 31st and the early morning hours of February 1st. They were reviewing surveillance footage submitted by neighbors and nearby businesses. They were visiting gun stores and firearms dealers in an effort to identify the holster worn by the masked suspect in the doorbell footage. An unusual holster that investigators believed might be traceable to a specific purchase. They were attempting to identify the suspect's clothing, the pants, shoes, shirt, and jacket, through manufacturer databases and retail distribution networks. The backpack, the Ozark Trail 25-liter hiker pack sold exclusively at Walmart, was already publicly identified as a potential lead. The FBI also pursued a technology that received significant public attention and some political controversy. Reports emerged that law enforcement was using a helicopter equipped with a specialized Bluetooth detection device designed to search for the signal emitted by Nancy Guthrie's cardiac pacemaker. The pacemaker, like most modern implanted cardiac devices, emits a Bluetooth signal that can, under the right conditions, be detected by specialized equipment. Investigators hoped that if Nancy was alive and within range of a search area, her pacemaker signal might give away her location. President Donald Trump, upon learning that this method had been publicly reported, expressed frustration with the disclosure, stating that by announcing the tactic, investigators had potentially tipped off whoever was holding Nancy and given them the opportunity to prevent the technology from working. The Pima County Sheriff's Department also issued a statement that will remain active for as long as it takes. This will remain an active investigation until Nancy Guthrie is found or all leads are exhausted. Pima County Sheriff Chris Nanos made a statement that was both significant and humane in its framing. The Guthrie family, all siblings and their spouses, had been formally cleared as suspects in Nancy's disappearance. Nanos described the family as victims, who had been fully cooperative with law enforcement throughout the process. He said publicly that they were not persons of interest and had done everything asked of them. That clearance matters not just legally, but investigatively. When a loved one goes missing, family members are always among the first people closely examined. Not out of cruelty, but out of statistical reality. The majority of violent crimes against individuals are committed by people known to the victim. Clearing the family entirely allows investigators to redirect their energy outward, toward the larger and more complex universe of possible suspects. In this case, with DNA that does not match anyone known to have been inside the home, with a masked figure who took deliberate steps to avoid identification, with ransom demands that suggest organized planning, the investigation has always pointed away from the family and toward someone else. Someone who knew enough about Nancy Guthrie's life and routines to plan this. Someone disciplined enough to mask their face, cover their hands, and attempt to blind a camera. Someone whose DNA has never before landed in a law enforcement database. That is the profile investigators are building. Quietly, methodically, and without the kind of public drama that would tip off the person they are looking for. As the investigation entered its fourth week, something shifted in the public-facing posture of law enforcement. Updates became less frequent. Statements became more guarded. The flow of information, which had been relatively steady in the first 2 weeks, began to slow. A retired FBI agent named Steve Moore told NewsNation that in his understanding, agents were potentially being told they may be rotating back to their home divisions, not because the case was cold, but because the most resource-intensive phase of the investigation had passed, and what remained required fewer bodies and more precision. Sheriff Nanos, for his part, pushed back firmly against any characterization of the case as cold. He said clearly, in multiple public statements, that as long as investigators had leads to chase, the case would not be considered inactive. "We're not going to give up. We're going to find Nancy, and we're going to find out who did this," he said. The silence is not absence of progress. In federal investigations of this nature, suspected kidnapping, ransom demands, forensic DNA work, genealogical analysis, much of the most important work happens out of public view. The genetic genealogy process alone can take weeks or longer to yield results. The forensic analysis of the Range Rover can take time. The clothing identification, the holster trace, the cell phone data review, none of it moves at the speed of a news cycle. It moves at the speed of accuracy. And accuracy, in a case like this, is more important than speed. The Guthrie family continues to call publicly for anyone with information to come forward. Savannah Guthrie, in a video posted to Instagram, said words that have resonated far beyond her platform. "We still have hope and we still believe. And I wanted to say to whoever has her or knows where she is that it's never too late. And you're not lost or alone. And it is never too late to do the right thing." Here is where this case stands as of today. Nancy Guthrie, 84 years old, mother, grandmother, woman of faith, vanished from her home in Tucson, Arizona on the night of January 31, 2026. Her blood was found on her front porch. A masked, armed, and gloved figure was captured on her doorbell camera. A glove was found 2 miles away. DNA was recovered from the glove and from inside the home. Neither matched any profile in the national database. A gray Range Rover was seized under circumstances that remain unexplained. Ransom notes demanded millions of dollars in cryptocurrency. The FBI and Pima County Sheriff's Department, supported by hundreds of investigators, continue to pursue every available lead. What was found inside Nancy Guthrie's home was not a single shocking object. It was a layered accumulation of evidence, each piece quiet on its own, each piece devastating in combination. Blood on the porch.